can't quite believe it, but I've just filmed this whole video only to realise that I accidentally deleted the first half. So, well done me. Let's try and record this again. Okay, so June is over, Whateverathon is over, and boy, what a month it has been. So today I'm going to take you through the final few books that I read and my thoughts on them. I'm going to share with you a few stats from this reading month, and then I'm going to rank all the books that I've read in the month of June. So the first book I read was Boy Snowbird by Helen Oyeyemi. This one hit my prompt of shiny cover, because look at that very gorgeous shiny bird, and also the prompt for poll, because I put a poll in the community Discord asking whether I should read this book, The Emperor Waltz by Hensher, or The Master's Tools Will Never Dismantle the Master's House as my next physical read. And this one came out as the winner. I've had this on my shelf for quite some time because I went through a phase of finding books that were fairy tale retellings, and this is supposedly a Snow White retelling, although it's more like a story with elements of fairy tales woven into it rather than like a true retelling. But this one has sat languishing on my TBR for quite some time, simply because it felt like a bit of a daunting book. It felt like, I mean, it's described, I believe, as literary, and I was just a bit worried that I wouldn't get it, that I wouldn't be into it. But this was a very quick read. This had me absolutely hooked. I loved it. I really want to try out some more of Helen Oyeyemi's writing. I've heard from other reviews that this is not a great one of hers to start with, that you should start with some of her other ones, and then if you're interested in her writing, to come back to this one. So again, that was another reason I was a bit putting it off, because I thought, oh no, I've picked up one that's not going to be great, but loved it. The only thing I will say is that the final 20 pages or so, there is a twist that comes in that feels quite transphobic. It's quite an uncomfortable thing to read. I don't think the intent was for it to be transphobic or to reference transgender in the way that I think it comes across. I believe from the way it was written, from the storyline, that what we're seeing is a trauma-induced personality disorder that has manifested as the character presenting as a different gender. Unfortunately, that doesn't come across well. But as I say, I don't think that the intent was malicious. I don't think the intent was that it should be transphobic. So I believe that this book was published when the author was fairly young. So this author has won awards for being for young novelists and things. So I just think perhaps it might have been a bit, I mean, the word is ignorant, but not in like a really derogatory way. I've been called up for using the word ignorant, but I mean it in its purest sense, in the sense of they didn't really understand what they were writing. They thought they were going down one route, but actually it's got other connotations. So I gave this 4 stars in the end, because I want to go back and read it and study it, and I loved it, and I really want to read other books by Helen. But yeah, those last 20 pages do somewhat ruin it, do make it feel a bit, there's this suggestion that that the transgender character can be brought back to their original character if only we could find them. Like, there's those sorts of suggestions which are very uncomfortable, but yeah, I don't think the intent was bad behind the writing. The next one I read and finished was This Poison Heart by Kaylynn Bayron. So does anyone remember this? I've gotten to a point where if I don't just prioritise reading This Poison Heart, I'm not going to. I think it's just going to keep getting pushed down and keep getting pushed down. So I'm going to try and prioritise that this month, just to try and make sure that it gets read, because who knows, it may end up being a favourite, but I just don't know. Yeah, that was me saying that I was a bit worried I wasn't going to enjoy it, and if I didn't just get it read, I would never read it. I really loved the reading experience of this one. It does read very YA, but that's mostly felt in the dialogue, and I suppose maybe because I'm a British reader reading very, very American ways of speaking, like certain American slang or colloquialisms, or I don't know what you'd call it, but there's a lot that jars me as a reader, but I think that's just because it's not the way that I speak. But there is enough in the plot and the world building, the magic system building to carry you through, and I did really love it. I mean, I believe the second book in the series came out this month, so in June. I think I will read it at some point. I'm not desperate to read it, but I think I will read it at some point. So yeah, I'm going to give that one another 4 stars because that was a really good read. Loved the story. Checked off 2021 release on my bingo board. The next one I read was this big chunky beast, The Emperor Waltz by Hensher. Now this was the most incredible book. I loved this book. When I'd finished Boy Snowbird, I thought, do you know what, I think I've just about got enough time to read a big book if I really push myself. And so I started this. I was so nervous about reading this. It's like pure literary fiction. It's got historical elements, but it is really pure literary fiction. So that tends to be a genre where it's a bit hit or miss for me. The Emperor Waltz is a piece of classical music by Johann Strauss. Go and listen to it if you don't know it off the top of your head, because you will recognise it. You'll recognise bits of it. The way this book is written, it even says on here, an astonishing novel. It draws together various narrative strands into a compelling symphonic whole. So there are 4 or 5 different stories going on in different time periods in this book that, whilst they don't overlap in terms of storyline, they overlap very much in terms of theme and what's being discussed. And then in each one you'll have elements of another one that just pops up. So it might be a character that pops up as a sort of very brief mention in another story, or an object that is created in one storyline that pops up in another, or a location, or in one case it is literally the colour of somebody's hair and a gesture that they make that has popped up across 2 different stories. I want to do a whole separate video on this because there is so much to say about it. I have added everything that Philip Hensher has written to my wish list, because this was a masterpiece, and this is clearly a very talented writer. It is LGBTQ. The LGBTQ bit is mainly in the 1970s and 80s London section, where the first gay bookshop is being opened, the first UK gay bookshop. It is very loosely based, and he acknowledges that, on Gay's the Word bookshop, which is a real bookshop in London. But it's not the same, it's not their story, it's just, the same time period that it was created, things like that. And it is own voices, so Philip Hensher, I believe, is gay. So whilst there was some bits that I thought, surely these are stereotypical gay men, this is not right, but I'm not a gay man, I'm going to trust that this is correct. But there is a lot of diversity in the ways that the different gay people are. They each have their own personalities, and it's very well built. It is an incredible book. The next book that I read was a bit of a shock. I wasn't supposed to be reading it this month. So that is Kingdom of the Cursed by Kerri Manniscalco, the second book in the Kingdom of the Wicked series. This came in at the library a couple of days ago, and I thought I'd perhaps start it this month but finish it next month. But this is one of those books that you devour. I just consumed this. I couldn't stop reading it. Considering it's another relatively chunky 400 and something pages, I read this in a couple of days, and I literally, just before filming this, I had to sit down and finish it. I had 50 pages left, and I was like, I've got to finish it. I've got to know what happens. Third book is coming out, I believe, in September, and I think that is the final one. I think it is a trilogy. I don't believe there's any more planned. But I'm going to have to read that too. This is brilliant. I'm going to talk more about this in one of my fantasy reading vlogs. But yeah, that was a really good read. I've given it 4 stars, even though I read it so quickly, even though I loved the story, because there was no other level to it. It was a fantastic story. She's fantastic at building the chemistry between characters, but there was no other themes being explored, nothing else coming in, and for me, to be a 5-star read, it needs to have those extra elements, those extra things that you want to think about and study, and which it doesn't. But I would actually quite like to own the whole series, because this is a library book. The first one is on my Kindle, and obviously I don't own the third one, but I think I could reread. This would be the sort of book that I would reread. The next book is one that I technically haven't finished, and that is When Women Were Dragons by Kelly Barnhill. I'm listening to this on audiobook, and I've got about 10% left of it, so I'm going to finish that today. So whilst I haven't actually finished it, as of recording, it will be completed in the month of June. This hit off my Dragons prompt, and this is, I'm almost certain, is going to be a 5-star read. Unless she crashes and burns in this last 10%, this is going to be a 5-star read. This is set in 1950s America. And we have this event that happens, which is called the mass dragoning, where women across the US become dragons and disappear. But it's all hushed up. Nobody wants to talk about it. These women are considered dead or disappeared, and they're just not spoken of. The way it's told is through the eyes of a child, although it is an adult looking back on her life, but you're seeing it through the eyes of a child. And then it's interwoven with research papers or speeches being given by a scientist who was researching at the time. It was very cleverly done in this time period, because obviously what we're seeing is this struggle of women against the oppression that they're facing in society, how they're, quieted, how they're not given access to academic path. They're thought they should be at home and just doing what women should do and be in the kitchen and look after the house. And the dragoning feels like this frustration and this breaking free of those shackles. But it's interesting to witness that through the eyes of a child who doesn't understand what's going on. And there's this mirroring of how the adults aren't telling the children anything. All those who are in a position of authority over a child's life, the parents, the teachers, don't want to tell the children anything, and so the children are so confused, they don't understand. They're getting these little hints about things that are happening, but they don't know what it is. But that mirrors how the government are hushing it up, and the adults are all sort of scared to be called in and questioned about what they're saying about dragons. So all the people who are researching it scientifically have been discredited, they've been removed from their positions, and they're having to research it in sort of an underground way. And because of the time period, again, we're getting it woven into how communism and the House Un-American Activities Committee was working at that time to basically discredit anyone who questioned communism and capitalism. Yeah, it was just really clever how Kelly wove all those different threads together to make this absolutely phenomenal book. But yeah, we've got 10% left. I really can't imagine this being any less than a 5-star. I'm listening to it on audio, but I need to own it because I need to annotate this. I need to study it. I love it. I absolutely love this book. And then finally, Audre Lorde's The Master's Tools Will Never Dismantle the Master's House. Another one I haven't quite finished, but I've read 2 of the 5 speeches, essays that are in it, and it's only a short book, so I do think I'll finish this today. Fantastic. I mean, there's not really much else to say on this one. It doesn't hit any of my bingo prompts. It's just a good read. Now, let's look at a few of the stats from this month. So, as long as I finish those 2 books, I will have read 14 books, which is 4 books over my goal of 10 for the month. And that gives me a total of 4,471 pages for the month. And, as you may have noticed, I did actually complete a full bingo board. There were some people who were doing multiple bingo boards. I believe I can only claim 1 bingo board, simply because When Women Were Dragons is the final prompt on my first bingo board, and I think you need to have fully finished a bingo board before you start the new one, even though many of the books I read could have checked off on other bingo boards. But anyway, I'm quite happy with how that's gone. Yeah, and I managed 14 books, considering I also read the chunky book that is The Emperor Waltz, so yeah, pat on the back for me. Of my 14 books, 10 were LGBTQ, which was obviously one of the big drivers behind this month. 3 of them I knew weren't going to be LGBTQ. Kingdom of the Cursed, A Cursed Heart, and then a third one that I can't remember which one, but I knew wasn't going to be LGBTQ. And then the one that surprised me was Swimming Home by Deborah Levy. I did think that was going to be LGBTQ and it wasn't, so don't be confused like I was. My books amassed me 10,025 points. Now, I don't know how that compares to other people. I'm quite looking forward to seeing other people's wrap-ups to see what their points were like, because it was a lot of fun doing the points. That's why I wanted to do this. I wanted to gamify my reading for a month. So it was really fun seeing how the points stacked up, but I don't know how that compares to anybody else, so it'll be fun to see other people's videos as well. So this month I had the highest average rating I've had for a month ever, and that was 4.29 stars out of 5, so that's pretty amazing. And so let's move into ranking the books from least favourite to favourite. In bottom place we have A Curse of Roses by Diana Pinuccia. Not dramatically in the last place. I have nothing horrendous to say about it. It's just, I just didn't care. I just wasn't a particular fan. The next one we have is A Cursed Heart by Jenny Hickman. This, unfortunately, was really disappointing because the first book in that series was so good. That's why it's quite low on this list. The next book we have is Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo. I am quite sad that this is so low, but I just felt like there could be more to it, and I'd love to read more of Elizabeth's work, and I'd also like to read other people who are writing in prose, in verse, because that was really beautiful. Next we have Sexing the Cherry, which was a 4-star read, so the fact that we're already at 4-star reads at this point on this list. But Sexing the Cherry by Jeanette Winterson. The reason this falls here is because it wasn't the most enjoyable reading experience because it's so chaotic. It was a phenomenal book, but it was just so chaotic that it can't be any higher up this list. Next we have This Poison Heart by Kaylynn Bayron, a much more fun read, but less interesting than Sexing the Cherry, but higher up the list because it was more of a fun read. Then we have The Garden of Eden by Ernest Hemingway. Again, this was one of the first books I read this month. Brilliant, loved it, can't wait to try some more Ernest Hemingway. Number 7, I'm tentatively putting in The Master's Tools Will Never Dismantle the Master's House. Obviously I haven't read it, but I think this is brilliant and I don't see how it could get any lower position. So this is a tentative placement for this book. Next we have Boy Snowbird by Helen Oyeyemi. As I said, loved it all the way through until the last 20 pages. Want to go back and study this. It's going on my to-study shelf. Loved it. Next we have Tentacle by Rita Indiana. Again, this one was a slightly less fun read because of how angry the writing style is, but so interesting, so well done, and the angry writing style worked in the context of this story. Then we have Red Rising by Pierce Brown. So this is the first book in a series and I'm really looking forward to reading the next one. It wasn't quite a 5-star read, I think because it incorporated battle scenes, which aren't my thing, but I loved the political machinations, the power hierarchies, loved that. Next we have Kingdom of the Cursed by Kerri Manniscalco. As I said, just finished this, flipping loved it. It is such a fun read. I want to own it for myself, I want to own the whole series, but there's no deeper levels to it. It is what it is. It's a fun read. That's what it is. Then the top 3. We're down to the top 3. And actually, I'm finding it really hard to rank these because I loved them all so much. Swimming Home by Deborah Levy, The Emperor Waltz by Philip Hensher, and When Women Were Dragons by Kelly Barnhill. All of them are incredible. Absolutely incredible. If pushed, I think I would put Swimming Home at the top of the list, simply because that read more like a thriller, so it was a touch more engaging, just a touch more engaging. So if I had to pick one, it would be Swimming Home, but those 3 just phenomenal reads and I highly recommend you read them. So that's the end of this wrap up. Hopefully I haven't gone on too long. An amazing month and I now can't wait for next month and see where this goes. Thank you for watching.